Hello. The Divine Code reading for September 21st, pages 211 and 212. Page 211 concludes the chapter 7, the obligation to eliminate idol worship and the prohibition of benefiting from it. Topic 17. It is permitted to wash in a bathhouse that contains forms or figures of gods, such as a statue of Aphrodite, because they are there for decoration and not for worship. So if it's a regular bathhouse, and there's statues there, even statues that in another location might be considered an idolatrous statue. But in this case, the statue is there for decoration. It's okay to be in that location, and probably a building lobby or something like that, which has a decoration. If in other cases it might be an idolatrous statue, but in the building lobby or the park or wherever it is, if the statue is considered there for decorative purposes, even if it might be a statue that would otherwise might be used for idolatry, it's permitted to be in that location. The prohibition of benefiting from idol worship applies only to forms or figures that are regarded as gods that people worship, and not figures they dishonor. For example, by urinating on a statue which stands next to a gutter. But if that is the customary way of worshiping the idol, then it is forbidden to enter that bathhouse. Rambam, The Laws of the Worship of Stars and Idols, 7:18, Shokanoric Eurydeia, chapter 142. Because that location is a house of idol worship. So if a public park has a statue in it, if the statue is for decoration, they wanted to have statues in the park, so they put a statue of a deity in the park, but it's there for decorative purposes. It would be permitted to be in the park. If they put the statue in the park for the purpose of public worship, then the location where that statue is would be forbidden as a house of idol worship. And the details of how it would be in a public thoroughfare, that you'd have to ask a rabbi about how the details would work in that. But in a bathhouse, if the bathhouse uses a statue as for decorative purposes, then it's considered okay to be in the bathhouse. If the bathhouse uses the statue for idolatrous purposes, then the building becomes a house of idol worship, and it would be forbidden to be in. And there might be a question, if it's a building lobby and somebody puts a statue in there and people coming into the building or at the building, they burn incense or something, they do some worship activity with the idol, but it's also a building, that would also be a complicated issue. But if it's clear cut that the building is being used for idol worship, you would not be allowed in it. If the building is used for business and there's an idol that's used for idol worship in the lobby, maybe best to find a different way to enter the building. Find the alley entrance or something. I'm not really sure what else to say for that. If there is a statue of an idol standing in a garden of a bathhouse for the purpose of decoration, it is nevertheless still permitted for one to bathe there. Rashi Tor Eurydeia, chapter 142, and Shach there. So if it's clear cut whether it's a decorative thing or if it's a idol, if it's clear cut one way or another, then it's either permitted or not permitted to be in the place. If it's a more complicated issue where the person needs to get from point A to point B, in that case, it would be necessary to discuss it with the rabbi to find out whether or not there's alternate routes or what the, you know, depending on the situation. Page 121 begins chapter 8, aspects of idolatry from which benefit is allowed, and nullification of idols. Topic number 1. Any object, any natural object that is not man-made and which was not physically altered in the service of the idol does not become forbidden for benefit, even if it is worshipped. Therefore, if idolaters worship mountains, hills, trees, which grew naturally or were originally planted for a non-idolatrous purpose, for example, for the fruit, shade, etc. Public or private springs, since they were attached to the ground, see Shak Yoredea 141.2 and Taz to Shak Yoredea 141.2 and 145.2 on both of those, and 145.3. A river or an animal, then such things are still permitted for benefit, even though those who worship such things in nature are idol worshippers in the full sense. They are liable for a capital sin, as explained above in chapter 3. So it's a natural object. Somebody is worshiping a mountain. That does not make the mountain prohibited for benefit, because it's a natural thing. If somebody made the mountain, that might be a different issue. But if the mountain is just in its natural state, it's not forbidden just because somebody worships it. The person who does the worshiping, that's still considered idol worship, and they would still fall under those categories. But the person, other people are not affected in the way they interact with the mountain because somebody worships it. Therefore, it is permitted to eat fruits that grow on mountains or on individual trees that were worshipped in their place of growth. See topic 7 below in this chapter. It is permitted to drink water from springs or rivers that were worshipped. So the mountain is doing what it normally does. Things grow on it. It's permitted to use things that are growing on it. And it's permitted to use a tree that is a natural tree, or it was not affected by the idol worship. It's permitted to use that tree, and it's permitted to drink water from a river. The water is just flowing through the river. Just because somebody worships the natural object of the river does not make the water prohibited. The water is still permitted for benefit, bathing or drinking or whatever. Likewise, an animal which was set aside for worship, whether to be worshipped or sacrificed, is permitted for benefit as long as the body has not been physically altered as a result of an act of idolatry being committed upon it. So the animal, it already exists. It isn't created for the sake of idol worship. It already exists. It's a natural thing. An animal exists. And somebody says that they're going to use it for idol worship, but hasn't done anything to affect the animal. Then the animal is still permitted for benefit by another person. However, if an act of idolatry is committed upon the animal, which invokes a physical change in the body of the animal itself, as opposing to worshiping it from a distance, which does not involve any mutation of the animal, then the animal becomes forbidden for benefit. However, if a person merely picks up the animal and moves it or waves it in service of an idol worship, this does not make the animal prohibited for benefit, since the body of the animal has not been changed. Likewise, if someone paints an animal or shears its hair in service of the idol, the animal itself is not forbidden, because these are not permanent changes. And then there's more about nullification. Will be in topic 16, which is further on in the chapter. So if the animal, and this would also be in the other cases, the mountain or the river, if it hasn't been affected, if the natural state has not been affected, what happens when the natural state is affected? It's an issue of acquisition. A change occurs that would change the natural state of the object. Is a method of acquiring the object. So if the person affects a change in the animal for the sake of the idol worship, then the animal has taken on the status of it's no longer the natural state of the animal. It takes on a status of the idolatrous state. And that would be something that physically changes the animal. And I think that affects the rivers and the mountains also, the trees. And this is similar to the things that cause acquisition to occur. And that's gone into more, this topic has gone into more detail on the unit of the divine code on the prohibition of theft. What things can change something so it's no longer its old status, it now has a new status. How so? For example, as soon as one begins to slaughter an animal for the sake of idol worship, which might involve cutting a vital passage in the animal's neck, or cutting a hole opposite its heart, in the manner that some idol worshippers will take out and offer an animal's heart while it is still alive. Even if the act was not completed, the animal becomes forbidden for benefit, because it becomes an object that had been offered to the idol. So if they cut the animal in a critical manner, they're talking about a hole cut next to the heart, or something that was used. That's a specific thing that was done for idolatry, or to slaughter it in the manner in the temple where it slaughters through the neck. Once the cut occurs, it changes the status of the animal, and it becomes acquired for the sake of the idol worship, and now it would no longer be permitted for benefit. But if something happened to the animal that could be reversed, that did not do a fundamental change to the animal, somebody sheared its hair or something to that effect, well, the hair will grow back. So that does not change the status of the animal. So that's what's being spoken of here, is something that changes the status of the object for the sake of idol worship, would make it not permitted for benefit. Thank you.